Last night in the famous Dolby Theater on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in Los Angeles, California, the film industry's biggest night. With 10 movies nominated for Best Picture, everyone seemed to have their favorite, but one movie did dominate the night, and the big award was presented by When Harry Met Sally, a reunion, Billy Crystal and Meg Ryan.
And the Oscar goes to? Are they playing us off?
No.
Oh.
Well, maybe. Anora.
Anora hauled in 5 Oscars in total, including that one Best Picture and Best Director. The film star, Maggie Madison, was named Best Actress. And then there was the others. Adrian Brody won for The Brutalist. Kieran Culkin won for his role in A Real Pain and managed to drop an F-bomb on television. Zoe Saldana was named Best Supporting Actress for her role in Emilia Perez, the first person of Dominican origin to win the award. Lots of big moments, not a lot of politics, and some people always do feel like their favorite movie was robbed. We want you to join the conversation today. What are you watching? What's really good? What's not living up to the hype? And in a world of endless streaming, do award shows matter? We want you to weigh in. 1-800-716-2221 or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Okay, before we get started, a friendly hello from me. I'm Sam McKeag. Normally, I would be the host of the CBC Saskatchewan News at 6 on television, and you are going to get used to me over the next 6 months. Leisha Grabinski is off on a big family adventure, so I am going to be keeping her seat warm until then. So, thanks for being here. I'm excited to get some time to get to know you, and on with the show. So, to weigh in on last night's big moments and to chat about all things pop culture and TV and movies, 2 of my favorite people to talk about this kind of stuff with. By day, Sean Trembath is a copy editor here at CBC. By night, he is an avid movie and TV fan. And Craig Silliphant is here too. He's a columnist, a film critic, and a movie geek. Both of them joining me from Saskatoon. Hi, guys.
Hi, Sam.
Okay, let's start with first impressions. I actually really enjoyed the show last night. Overall, found it really easy watching. Craig, what do you think of the Oscars?
I think it was okay. I mean, I've seen a lot worse years, but it was fairly generic, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I feel like it definitely had a lot of elements that caused it to run over time pretty late. It was longer than The Brutalist, which is a long movie.
That's fair. Sean, what did you think?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I mean, you called it what? Nice viewing, something like that? Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. There was nothing particularly offensive about it, either in the sort of show or even the winners, in my opinion. And yeah, it was just sort of one of these ones that I think we're probably not going to be talking about again in the future for good or bad reasons, which is kind of also true of the film lineup, I think, but maybe that's something we can get into.
Do you think that some of that has to do with who they chose as a host, Craig?
That's a good question, but I think the producers have a lot bigger hand in it. I'm not sure how much Conan would have. I mean, obviously he writes a lot of his own jokes and stuff, but they have other things that they have to put in there for whatever reason. So I don't know that Conan would have had that much control over that. And I thought he did a good job as a host.
He moved it along, but he made a promise off the top that he wasn't going to waste time and that it wasn't going to be too long. But what do you think made it too long, Sean? Why was it a little long in the tooth?
Well, really what stuck out to me was a few of the segments. One in particular that was just glaring to me was the whole James Bond dance song sequence. I still don't really know what the point of that was. I mean, part of me was wondering, with Amazon having just sort of bought all the James Bond rights, did Bezos slip someone, a big check or something? Otherwise, I just don't understand why it was there.
Craig?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I was pleased to hear this year that they had cut out the performing of the nominated songs, because that often adds a lot to it. And honestly, they're not usually great songs. But now we've got the Wicked opening, which isn't for me necessarily. I can understand why it was there, but it was also very long. It was 2 songs, wasn't it?
It was like kind of a mashup. There were multiple songs in there.
Yeah, so it was like a medley or something.
Yes.
And then the Bond thing that Sean mentioned obviously was, again, inexplicable to me as well. They did Ease On Down the Road by The Wiz, which is fun, and it was a good performance by Queen Latifah, but again, you're just adding stuff. And then there was a Quincy Jones tribute, too, which is sort of, out of place. And so all the time you saved taking the songs out, you end up adding, much more back in. Even Conan, who's said he was going to keep it on track all night, had a song about how it wasn't going to go over time.
That was the one thing I didn't understand right off the top, is he said, I'm going to keep things on time, and then gave us a 3-minute song about not, and I had a head scratch moment on that. Okay, let's get into the movies, because that's what we're here to talk about today. Movies, TV shows, what's good, what's not. Do either of you feel really strongly, and I can see you, about a movie that was robbed, that you feel just should have gotten more credit than it did?
I don't think so in terms of a movie. No, not off the top of my head.
No, Sean? Anybody?
Yeah,
You feeling robbed?
I can't think of any straight up robberies. There's a few. For instance, I would have liked to have seen Nickel Boys nominated for cinematography. I think that really was what that whole movie was about. But I certainly can't fault them for giving The Brutalist the award. Yeah, at no point I can't think of anything that really offended me.
The issue for me, I thought, was the director category. There were some missing directors in there. Particularly, I thought John Chu was robbed when you consider the scale of Wicked and what that movie took on. Whether you liked it or not, you have to acknowledge the size of the cast and the amount of work that movie would have taken. I was surprised not to see his name there. What do we make of diversity? And I want to get into this because it's been 10 years since the Oscars So White movement. You remember the hashtag, and when people basically straight up said, this is all white people talking about white people doing white people, good job, clap, clap. And I thought it was a really nice moment last night when Paul Tazwell was the first black man to win for Best Costume Design. And then Zoe Saldana for the longest time, and now she's saying her name properly as well and embracing that Dominican background. We're seeing, do you think that they could do better in diversity in the show?
Well, so my opinion on that is I agree. It was nice to see those moments. I think that sometimes the sort of blame for that gets put on the Oscars when really you need to take a step back and look at the people deciding what movies get made, right? I think that there's still could be much more work to be done in giving diverse people stronger roles in stronger films. So I think that, to say it's the Oscars' fault is maybe kind of missing the point to me.
Do you think, Craig, that they've improved, though, from that movement 10 years ago?
I think in terms of what you see in the telecast on screen, but I would have to 100% agree with Sean there that it's not really an award show problem per se. It's what's getting in the pipeline at the start to end up being on an award show in the end.
Is the pipeline better?
I think the pipelines maybe would be marginally better than it was 10 years ago, but I would guarantee that for as much sort of bluster as you hear about this kind of thing, I'm sure it's still probably just mostly straight white men getting the opportunities to make a lot of these movies, 90% of them.
Or certainly getting to make the decisions about what movies are getting made, if nothing else.
I was going to say, is that a studio head problem then, where it's still white men predominantly making those decisions?
It could be a studio head thing, but I think it's even when you get down to the executives, they're all like terrified of making the wrong move and doing the wrong thing, and so they don't take chances. And you hear that time and time again from creators of all, like whether they're white or not.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about hype, because there was a lot of hype around The Substance, particularly with Demi Moore and her win in the previous award show. The movie, for me, I had to watch it twice, because the first time I tried to watch it, I didn't get it. And I didn't finish it. And then on a second watch, it had me on messaging. And then there was an ending that I thought was logical. And then it lost me. And I know, Craig, I messaged you over the weekend and said, oh my God, this ending is so dumb. Let's talk about The Substance, because I did think Demi Moore was amazing in that movie.
Well, I really like The Substance. And one of the things, as I was thinking about this, The Substance versus some of the other films, a thing that struck me is I went and saw The Substance in the theater, and at that point, no one knew it was going to be a Best Picture nominee. It was a cool new horror movie. And on that level, I loved it. I mean, I am a fan of sort of freak movies, and this is certainly that. I loved every minute of it. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say in terms of you not connecting with it. I thought the thematically it was strong. I thought visually it was strong. I'm very, very excited to see what the director Courtland Fargy does going forward, especially now that she's had this nomination. Even though it didn't win, it is sort of a just great to be nominated thing, because you have to think this young, interesting director kind of just gets to do whatever she wants next, which is great.
Yeah, I think Sean makes a great point there, that, you know, it wasn't awards fodder when it came out in the theater. And I know I said this to you on the weekend too, Sam, but I laughed really hard at that ending, because it did remind me of a lot of these 80s trauma-style exploitation films that I grew up watching. So to me, it was sort of blending that with some of it. I think the messaging was awesome in the movie, but it was a little bit on the nose at times. It's a good message, but it was like they're kind of slapping us in the face with it a bit. And I will say that, we mentioned like snubs and what didn't we see. I mean, obviously, Mikey Madison won the award, and Demi Moore was favored to win, with Mikey sort of nipping at her coattails there. But I think it should have gone to Demi, and I think it's, everything we were just talking about is like you've got this movie that's about how Hollywood won't look at a woman over, well, I mean, she's in her 60s, but won't look at a woman over 35. And of course, they're not going to give her an award about a movie that sort of points that out, you know what I mean? So, I just found some irony there. But
I will say the message of that movie is so good. For me, it was, and maybe it's that's where the movie really moves into the body horror side of it, that I was just like, this is not for me. I thought there was a natural ending, and it really pushes the envelope. And I don't want to spoil it for people, because it is the kind of thing that you actually spoil if you talk about what it is. So while it sounds like we're talking in circles, you kind of have to see it, or we've ruined the movie for you.
Right, with the caveat that if you're going to watch it, no, it gets extremely gory and violent. So if you are a squeamish person, it probably just isn't the movie for you, and that's okay, different strokes.
Absolutely. What about the public's kind of distaste for Amelia Perez? Because that movie also got a lot of tension going into the Oscars, and aside from Zoe Saldana, I'm going to have to get used to saying this properly. Aside from her, didn't really get a lot of attention last night, other than Selena Gomez had a really beautiful dress.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'm a bit of a trendsetter, because I was not a fan of Amelia Perez before the controversy with it and stuff. So I watched it. I didn't really love it. Now, fair enough, it's a musical, which aren't always my thing. So maybe there was something in it for somebody else. I mean, I think it had some good themes and stuff in it. Obviously, there was some controversy around Gascon and stuff, and I wasn't even sure if she was going to be there last night, but she obviously was.
Yeah, I, on the other hand, saw it sort of very late in the Oscar process. I was going in expecting basically the worst movie I've ever seen. That was sort of the discourse around it. And I ended up thinking it was, not great, but I was able to find some things to enjoy about it, to the point where, again, had it not been nominated for all these Oscars, I probably would have just went, okay. That was a movie. And so yeah, I wasn't necessarily hating it as much as anyone else. And I do think if it was going to get an Oscar, Zoe Saldana was the person to get it. I mean, she really carried that movie for better or worse, for what it was. So in terms of the controversy, there's also a lot of sort of, identity discourse going on there, not all of which I'm fully qualified to speak about. But yeah, I mean, I guess, again, my take on it is sort of lukewarm rather than heated in either direction.
Okay, we also want other people to join the conversation. We did get an email from Judy that says, why aren't these movies shown in Regina? I'd like to be able to see all of them. And then it also says the Oscar set was very dramatic, just couldn't see the actors very well. Why, Craig? I know that is a challenge, and this year that was really a challenge for people to actually see these movies before the Oscars versus afterwards.
I think a large part of that is just based on our geographic location, really. I mean, we just don't get I make my best of list at the end of every year, and it's often not until even February, March when I'm starting to see some of the stuff that would be on the major cities critics list, because we just don't get it here then. So I was able to see pretty much everything except for I'm Still Here, which I know did play in Saskatoon, and I just missed it. But everything else, though, was on VOD or probably played in Saskatoon at the Roxy or Broadway, or in Regina at the RPL at some point.
The director of Anora made an appeal to the public last night that I really, really liked. And it was about going to see movies in the theater. That's something in our family we still do a lot. Like probably every week or 2 weeks, we'll try and go see something in the theater. It's an experience. But I know a lot of people, maybe a fallout from the pandemic, have really started expecting these movies to come to their homes first. I'm curious if you two prefer to see movies in the theater or at home.
I mean, I'm certainly a theater preferer, as it were, and it does really inform your sort of like experience of the movie. The one that really hammered it home for me this year was The Brutalist, which is a very long movie. I just know if I had watched that at home on my couch, the phone would have come out. I would have not really connected with it in the same way. Whereas in a theater where I'm sort of forced to dial in, I ended up really liking it, really, really connecting with it. So out of respect to sort of the films themselves, I think the theater is the right move. And also, look, we're here having a movie nerd conversation. We are, I'm sure people that this is sort of part of the experience of our lives. So, So yes, you're talking to a biased crowd here. Get to the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a movie guy too. I will throw in the caveat, though, that between the half hour of commercials before each screening, the increased length of movies these days, even a buddy comedy is like 2 hours and 10 minutes now, which was an hour and a half in 20 years ago. And then the general etiquette of a lot of people in the theater. I have a pretty nice TV and surround sound system in my house, and I love going to the theater, but I have to say that some of all those things I mentioned will sometimes push me to do it at home.
Okay. We want you to join the conversation as well. What did you like? What's not living up to the hype? And not just Oscar movies. What have you watched lately that maybe needs a little bit of attention? Give us a call, 1-800-716-2221, or email us, bluesky@cbc.ca. Coming up in the next half hour, we're also going to talk about television, what's good, what's coming up as Hollywood catches up from the writer's strike. But let's talk about what's coming in terms of movies. Much has been made historically about the Memorial Day weekend. They used to throw movies out that would compete against each other. They'd be the big blockbusters. They don't really do that anymore. It's almost like the movies don't want to compete against each other because everyone wants the biggest chunk of the pie. The Memorial Day weekend movie this year is Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning. Is it the final one? Tom Cruise will never tell. What are you guys looking forward to seeing and what's coming out? And it doesn't even necessarily have to be in May, but what are you most amped about?
So I made myself a little list here. These are actually, I just stuck to March, which we've just started here because, there's, first of all, I mean, this weekend, Mickey 17 comes out. That's the new movie by Bong Joon-ho, who most people, if they know him, would know him for Parasite, which won Best Picture.
Oh, so good.
Yeah, great movie. And, a classic example of a foreign respected director who has this big hit and gets given a bunch of money. I mean, this is like $100+ million sci-fi action epic. For those that don't know, it stars Robert Pattinson. It is about a future where he signs up to do extremely dangerous work, so dangerous that he is dying on the job constantly, but then they've got a system where they can clone him, put him out, and he goes back to the dangerous work. It looks very funny. It looks very, madcap. And I'm looking forward to it a lot. Then you go one weekend forward, and you've got Steven Soderbergh's Black Bag, which, I don't know if it's going to be a award season type show, but it looks like a good, solid sort of adult thriller. This is about Michael Fassbender and Cate Blanchett. They are a married couple who are both in, I don't know if it's the CIA or sort of a similar kind of spy organization, and as happens in movies like this, intrigue is afoot. You know, there's a mole in the organization, yada, yada, yada. Maybe I'm not selling it well enough, but it does just look like a good, solid sort of thriller to me. So those are a couple coming up imminently that I'm excited to check out.
Okay, Craig, as I promised, Sean gave us his list of kind of what he is looking forward to. What's on your coming soon must-watch list?
I think, definitely Mickey 17 that Sean mentioned, and Black Bag as well. I mean, you mentioned Mission Impossible. My son and I like to go to those ones, so I always think that, whatever you think about Tom Cruise, he earns the money that you pay to go to that movie ticket. There's a couple of superhero movies this year, actually, that I'm looking forward to, and that genre's deciding whether or not it wants to circle the drain, but I think Superman could breathe new life into that, and James Gunn taking that over, and the Fantastic Four looks interesting as well. And then the other thing, Ryan Coogler, who's a very good director, has a movie called Sinners coming out later this year. So off the top of my head, those are some that I'm looking forward to.
I want to be excited for Superman. I like James Gunn. I'm glad that they're giving it another shot, but I just think that Superman is the lamest superhero.
Well, he's pretty powerful, which is hard to dramatize.
Just the high school quarterback that's like good at everything. I don't know. I can't.
But the previews for Superman are beautiful. Like, it looks like a really nice looking movie.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm interested, but I just know in the past I've always found Superman to be kind of lame.
That's okay. That leads me to my next question, actually, because I know Marvel has led to some strong feelings among moviegoers over the last few years. They have flooded the market with movies. They've flooded television with short series. Are we over Marvel? I mean, I will always go. They make me laugh. I actually really enjoyed the latest Captain America, even though it was long. I have strong feelings over anything over 2 hours. But they have Fantastic Four, First Steps, coming July 25th. Daredevil Born Again starts on the 4th. Ironheart, a TV series, starts on CBS June 4th. Eyes of Wakanda starts on Disney Plus in August. And then Marvel Zombies, which is a TV series that has brought on Robert Kirkman of The Walking Dead fame, starts in October. And then there also have Avengers movies coming down the pipe. I know you made a joke about superhero movies kind of circling the drain, Craig, but are people over them, or are they just not as good as they were before?
I think they're not as good as they were before, and I think that people could get over them, but they won't if these things are good. If Superman turns out to be amazing and wins over Sean, the audiences will feel that as well. But the problem is, I mean, even with Captain America, it was fine, but when you're comparing it to some of these movies they made in the past, they knocked out hits for like 10, 15 years or so, and there was rarely anything of sort of low quality in there. But here's the other thing too that I think about is, people go, well, there's too much diversity or too much whatever in these movies, and it's like, but they're making things that appeal to different people, and that's fine. I just may have to realize at some point that not all of these things need to appeal to me. I started watching the Agatha series on the treadmill.
It's so good.
I didn't really love it. I mean, I watched a few episodes of it, and I didn't mind it. It was funny, and I liked the cast and everything, but ultimately, I just realized about 4 episodes in that I don't know that this is for me. And I grew up, reading comic books and only having like 3 superhero movies in existence when I was younger. So as you were sort of saying, I'm compelled to see these things whether I want to or not. And I'm starting to realize that maybe not every Star Wars show, maybe not every Marvel show is necessarily directed at me, and that's okay.
Yeah, now I feel like I'm just a little bit further on the progression here because I was also a comic book kid growing up. I was super dialed into the Marvel Universe, like up through maybe the Avengers Endgame sort of stuff. And then I just started sort of falling off, finding myself being less interested. The list you gave of the upcoming things is actually a great sort of example of what the problem is to me, where it's like, okay, we got Fantastic Four. Cool, I'm excited to see that. Daredevil, yeah. And then all of a sudden it's like, Ironheart, and my eyelids just start to flutter. My attention starts to think about other things. So it for me, I think part of it is, they just ran out of sort of compelling franchises, maybe, or maybe they just haven't done as good a job with some of them. I'm waiting for the stretch that kind of pulls me back in, because I do have a nostalgic love for these types of stories, but it happened with Star Wars too. At some point, I just sort of fell off, and then also because of the kind of serialization of it, it can sort of feel hard to get back on sometimes. You know that whatever movie you're watching got 45 minutes of setup in the previous movie, and it just sort of stops being as exciting for me.
Okay, before we move on to television, because I do want to move on to TV, because there's smart TV and there's comfort TV and there's all kinds of TV. If you're watching something that you think other people need to watch, 1-800-716-2221 or email us bluesky@cbc.ca. Susan says, one of the best movies I saw this year was Cabrini. Very powerful movie, actually, with what's happening in the USA, even more powerful. Craig, did you see that one?
I have not.
That one is about an Italian immigrant that arrives in New York in 1889. And it's about Francesca Cabrini, and she's greeted by disease, crime, and impoverished children. And she sets off on this mission to convince the mayor to secure housing and health care for the society's most vulnerable. So that one's a little more of a more serious watch, but one of those kind of powerful movies that maybe incites you to be inspired to go do something, which I think movies really do have kind of the power to do. Let's shift over to television, because this is where I have fallen in more than with movies, because Hollywood is now really catching up after that writer's strike, and we're really starting to see these TV shows coming out. Some of them have already started. I have a list of my must-watch shows that are either in progress or coming out. But Sean, what is on your must-watch list right now?
Well, I got to admit, I saw your list beforehand, and really, I'm less immersed in TV than you, and my sort of must-watch is all on your list. I mean, I'm very excited to jump into Yellow Jackets Season 3. I got into Severance, which is now on Season 2. I went back and watched Season 1, which I hadn't seen. That's really doing it for me. Those are sort of two big ones for me. I haven't really got into Yellow Jackets yet, because I do like to wait until the whole season is out, and then I can just, binge watch it, as they say.
Can you explain for people what Severance is about? Because I watched the first episode, because when I was in Saskatoon a couple weeks ago, you said to me you need to watch Severance. And I watched the first episode, and the entire time I thought, what am I watching? So what is the show about?
Well, I mean, it's a sort of, I guess, what you would call a mystery box show, right? Where it's slowly revealing itself. It is a kind of dystopian sci-fi premise where in this future you can get a job where they do a procedure on your brain so that when you go to work, your sort of at work version of yourself and your at home version of yourself do not share memories or know anything about each other, The idea would be that you're doing some sort of top secret work that the outside world can't know about. Now, what's sort of dystopian about that is, especially if you're the person at work, that means that your whole life is work. I mean, your day starts with you walking out of the elevator to get to work. You walk into the elevator, and the next second that is you're back at work for the next day. It is a hellish existence, as one of the characters put it. So in terms of where it goes from there, I mean, there's a lot of sort of interesting threads that get pulled out pretty slowly. It is a slower moving show, I'll give you that. But, if you're someone that likes, again, these puzzle box shows, something like a Lost, say, not that this is exactly analogous to that, but it is one of these shows there, the plot's just kind of getting pulled out little bit by little bit. And I found it really connected with me, but again, different strokes.
I'm going to give it an episode 2. Once I figured out that it was like, oh, this is a work-life balance thing. And when I'm at home, I just get to be at home. And when I'm at work, I get to be at work. But it's controversial and stuff. So I will give it a second episode watch, but I was like, oh, I thought severance meant these people were going to be fired because the movie poster implies he's a business guy, and I was like, oh, this is going to be like an up in the air George Clooney firing people kind of. It's not that at all. Craig, what about you? What's on your must watch?
Well, right now, actually, one of my favorite shows from the last few years is in progress on HBO. It's The White Lotus season 3, Mike White's show about. Generally, it's about sort of privileged people that go to this. Well, each season is a different resort, and they're all self-contained. Though there is some now, we're seeing some narrative arc like moving through the seasons. That one's just amazing. It's so funny and so just telling about people. There's also I'm actually pretty excited for that Daredevil show. It's getting some pretty amazing reviews. So as much as we were kind of talking smack about the comic book stuff, that one could help in some reinvigoration. Andor season 2, that's probably the best of the Star Wars shows. That's just kind of a little bit smarter than most of the Star Wars is coming out. The Last of Us season 2 is coming out.
Yes.
Based on the video game, sort of again, you could have some fatigue with the zombie-ish genre, the post-apocalyptic genre, but season 1 proved to be a really good show with even at 1 or 2 really special episodes. And then there's one called The Studio that's coming up, a Seth Rogen show, very much a satire of Hollywood and stuff like that. So I like anything Seth does, so I think this should probably be good too.
Have either of you got into The Pit?
No, I haven't. I know my wife looked at it and was like, I thought, is that just ER or something? Because it's got Noah Wyle on the cover and it's ER. But it sounds like it's interesting, though. I would check it out.
The premise of it, and we are obsessed in my house. It's on Wednesdays. You can watch it on Crave or HBO. The premise is that it is like 24, where every episode is 1 hour in this Philadelphia emergency room. And it shows what doctors and nurses go through in an emergency room: long wait times, complicated family dynamics, personal issues, and really humanizes the staff. But it is so smart. And all of the reviews I've read from medical professionals say that it's also the most accurate medical drama that's on TV. And it is, as Sean would say, not necessarily for the squeamish at times. They show a lot of things. But it is probably my favorite accidental find on television. I'm so stoked for The Handmaid's Tale. Season 6 of that starts on April 8th, and it's the final season of that one. And given everything that's going on in the world right now, I know that it was very on the nose when it started, and there was a lot of conversations about the way women were treated, and you saw the protests in the United States, the women on the steps of the Capitol and the white wings and stuff like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they wrap up that whole series. And then Landman is the other one that I've just started watching that everyone said you absolutely must watch. And my fiance used to work in the oil rigs. So for him, like, a lot of it is he's like, oh yeah, that would happen. Oh yeah, that's totally a risk. Oh yeah, that's going to blow up. Like, he can see these things happening as they go and says it's really realistic. It's interesting to me to see Billy Bob Thornton in something that's kind of a serial and not a movie.
That's one of those ones I call my treadmill shows, because there's certain shows I'll watch on the treadmill that I wouldn't probably have the patience to sit and watch. It's all the Taylor Sheridan shows, actually. It's Lioness
Really?
with Zoe Saldana, Yellowstone, obviously. And the reason for that, and Landman I haven't started yet, but that's next on my list. But it's, I call Yellowstone a rope opera, basically, because it's kind of like a cross between Dallas, but then every 7 minutes, something violent or exciting has to happen. So when I'm on the treadmill, it sort of keeps my attention, you know what I mean?
Okay, but there's like smart TV that's a little more highbrow. It takes some time, some character development. And then there's comfort viewing. And I have also very much leaned into the comfort viewing. I am obsessed with High Potential. It has the woman from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia in it. She's hilarious and wonderful. Dr. Odyssey with Joshua Jackson, which is about like medical drama on a cruise ship. What could go wrong? And the Matlock reboot with Kathy Bates. Those are my 3 that I literally will watch every single week. And I believe Dr. Odyssey actually comes back this week after a little break. So I've been kind of excited about that. Do you guys have comfort viewing, or are you that network TV doesn't interest you?
I say most network TV doesn't really interest me. If I have comfort viewing, it's generally like something really bad. My wife and I might watch The Ultimatum or what's the one where they're in the pods?
Love is Blind?
Love is Blind. Like
You watch Love is Blind?
I'll watch Love is Blind.
I
we
thought
don't
that
really
would be
watch it on like
beneath you.
a weeknight. That's more of like a Sunday morning. You just kind of rolled out of bed. You're only half paying attention. You make a cup of tea, turn it on. You know what I mean? Other than that, though, I think my treadmill shows kind of fulfill that. And otherwise, it's, there's a lot of great content out there and only so much time. So I generally tend to focus on stuff I know is going to be quality.
What about you, Sean? Do you have some comfort viewing? Some reality TV? I'm into The Traitors. That's
actually,
my...
that is on my list. My sort of, I guess, genre of comfort viewing is these kind of junky competition reality shows. You may or may not know the new season of Survivor just started. I am
did not
a
know that.
Survivor watcher.
How many seasons now?
Believe this is season 48. I mean, I haven't watched all 48, but I did. It might have been a pandemic thing. I sort of got back into it and have since been watching each of the new seasons. Although my top one, and I'm very excited because the newest season premieres next Thursday, is Top Chef. And
yes.
This season of Top Chef happens to take place in Canada. It's Top Chef Canada, but not Top Chef Canada. It's American chefs here I think they're doing like Toronto, PEI, Calgary. They're going to jet them around, and I'm sure we'll get to see some very fancy poutines. It's just an exciting time to be a Top Chef fan in general. And I've watched every season of that show, many of them multiple times. So that's my list.
I guess cooking shows are also kind of comfort show for me. Like I love Next Level Chef, Kitchen Nightmares. Something about Gordon Ramsay just like yelling at people about how to make their stuff better apparently just does it for me. We got an email, and some people do fall back into rewatches for comfort viewing. I can do that as well because you know exactly what's going to happen. There's no anxiety. Kevin from Regina says, my comfort watches are basically TNG era Star Trek shows. They would like to know if you're nerdy enough to debate Star Trek Deep Space Nine versus Babylon 5.
I'm not quite there. I do have a very nerdy rewatch that I have been thinking it might be time to get back on the horse. And for me, that's X-Files. I'm an X-Files guy through and through. I've watched the whole show, I don't know, 3 times, maybe more. But big TNG fan too, although again, maybe not quite equipped for the type of debate a true Trekker would get into.
I'm 100% the same as Sean. I'm a huge X-Files fan. I've probably watched that show 7 or 8 times from start to finish. And I also really like Star Trek, the original series, Next Generation as well. So,
okay. I want to talk about wrestling because I feel like putting this out there is just putting a target on my forehead. I grew up watching it. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I loved everything about it. The Hart family, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Degeneration X. I grew up in the height of the ridiculousness of, Vince McMahon's WWF at the time. But since it has gone to Netflix, I have been sucked back in. And I got sucked back in on night 1. We watched the launch of it. Hulk Hogan was there. X-Pac was there. I know both of you are not wrestling aficionados, but walking around the office, I have encountered more than one person who is secretly or not so secretly a wrestling fan. Is this making wrestling, dare I say, cool again?
I think it could be. I mean, it's definitely pretty high profile. It's a big deal with Netflix. I know my wife was even, we've got separate profiles on Netflix, and usually those algorithms are so different between what we watch that you can't, they look like 2 different streaming services. Yeah. But we were both getting spammed with the WWE stuff before they launched. So, and I would say too, I'm not a fan of wrestling, but it's if that's what you're into, that's cool. That's what you're into. I mean, wrestling is fun, and it's just not particularly my thing. But it's I don't think it has to be this secret thing that you have to keep hidden. It's just a fun form of entertainment. People go, oh, it's fake. Well, sure, the storylines are just as fake as any other dramatized series we watch, or any reality series, to be honest. But you can't tell me that those guys aren't really taking a pounding, or that there's not real stuff going on there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have and it sounds weird to say this, sort of like an intellectual appreciation of wrestling.
Yeah.
Sort of what you're talking about. Like, I'm not looking down at the people that like it. I'm not that into the actual product. Like, actually watching the wrestling matches, I can usually only get through one or two before, it just doesn't excite me. Although I will say last year, I think it was last year, one of our coworkers here invited me out with him and his kids to go see a live wrestling show. AEW was in town, and I went and saw that, and it was great. I had a great time. Chris Jericho was there talking smack about Saskatoon. And again, I get that it's good for the people who it's good for. Yeah, I just never really connected with it on like that visceral level, By the third, fourth match of the night, I've seen enough body slams.
But you did hear what happened over the weekend with the Elimination Chamber, yes?
I think someone in the office said that John Cena became a villain.
He's a bad guy now. I haven't been this invested in this since I was like 12.
Something you never thought you'd see, right?
No.
John Cena reference? No?
You can't see me as a bad guy. But the return of The Rock and just how invested that Toronto crowd was on Saturday night. I think it's a fun new quote unquote reality TV series for people to get into, and I think Netflix just made it more accessible for people, especially not having to pay that big pay-per-view cost. In the way that they had to, and I appreciate wrestling maybe because of the storyline and because it's fake, because I have a hard time watching UFC. Like, I have a really hard time watching people beat the crap out of each other to beat the crap out of each other and breaking bones and all of those things, where it seems that wrestling tries to stop before they completely destroy someone's physicality. And so that's the line for me, is maybe I prefer things to be a little fake. As we're slowly winding to the end of the show here, I want to talk about underrated shows or movies that you think really deserve a plug, or movies that maybe you've seen. I really enjoyed, as we're talking about wrestling, Deathmatch, which was the Lowell Dean wrestling horror movie that came out a little earlier this year. They had a big premiere in Regina, and it showed across the country. I got a kick out of that. Chris Jericho is in that movie. But I'm wondering if there's other things that you guys have seen or watched that you think maybe deserve a little plug, little attention, whether they were made here or made elsewhere.
We were talking earlier about TV shows we're looking forward to this year, and I scrolled on my phone and realized that I had missed one that I do think is worth a plug. It's called The Rehearsal with Nathan Fielder, and season 1 aired. Season 2 is coming out this year, and it's season 1 was just so bizarre. It's not only a television show, but it's some kind of experiment in reality. The premise is that Nathan Fielder wants to help people sort of do the things they want to do. So in one instance, there's a guy who he has been lying about his PhD for many years in this trivia group that he's in at a bar trivia night, and he wants to tell the group that he doesn't really have his PhD, and he's thinks this is going to be a big deal. So Nathan Fielder designs this whole plan for him to be able to do this, and they walk through it with each person, and it gets kind of ridiculous. But over the scope of the season, without giving too much away, certain things start to happen that, like, it stops being this sort of one-off episode with a story happening and becomes this longer ongoing thing about where he ends up living with this woman and they're sort of fake raising this child, and then it goes
That's
really deep into like psychology. It's bizarre. You have to kind of see it to get it. But so I don't even know what season 2 is going to look like, because it was hard to see where even season 1 was going when it was happening.
How did you stumble across that one?
It's just an HBO show, and I'm a fan of Nathan Fielder. He had a show called Nathan for You, where he did a similar thing before. He would go to businesses, almost like the Gordon Ramsay that you mentioned, where he fixes a restaurant in 24 hours. So Nathan Fielder would go out there.
Hours, right?
Yeah, but it was more like, it was very satirical in funny ways. He had a yogurt shop once that he thought, they'll get a lot of press if they have a poop flavor. So they actually had a scientist create a poop flavor of yogurt that people could eat, and that's the kind of silliness of the show.
Gross. Sean, what about you? Things that you've been watching, or that like this people need to know about this?
Okay, so I knew this question was coming, and I decided to go for like a pretty deep cut. I hope that's okay.
I don't care.
You know,
fine.
I'm like a horror guy, and I was trying to think of something that people probably haven't heard of. Craig, maybe. But so it's the 2021 movie called Hellbender. It's available on Shudder, and I think that you can, rent it on the various services. The interesting thing about this is it is quite low budget, and it's made by this family, coincidentally called the Addams Family. That's just sort of, that's their name. It makes it very hard to Google them, I'll tell you that. But this is a family of artists, basically, who kind of travel around, I think, in like an RV and sort of like make these independent films as a family. This one, Hellbender, is pretty interesting. It's about like a mother and a daughter who live this kind of secluded life in the wilderness of like Seattle-ish area. And the mother is very adamant that the daughter cannot go into public. She tells her she's got an autoimmune disease. If you see anyone else, you could very easily get sick and die. Of course, what do you think happens in a movie like that? The daughter starts to venture out a little bit, and it ends up being a strange, sometimes sort of psychedelic movie about witchcraft and inheritance of like dark powers. The mother and the daughter also have like a 2-person metal band that there's a bunch of scenes of them like jamming out. And it's just one of those ones that I had no idea what it was. I was literally scrolling the service, watched the trailer, thought it was neat, ended up reading up on this cool family. So one of the daughters who's usually in the movies isn't in this one because she was like off at university. But when she comes back, she'll be in their next one. It's just this kind of neat, independent film story that also ended up being a cool, something you've never seen sort of movie. So Hellbender. Okay. That's what I'm giving you.
I will actually look that up when I get home tonight. I think it's cool to end on the note of an independent film because Anora was an independent film, and it goes to show you that you can tell whatever stories you want, whether it's in news or documentary or film, and that people will watch them and people will acknowledge them and they will acknowledge the work and the stories. So I think that that's a cool note to end on. Sean, Craig, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and nerding out over movies and TV. It is always fun when you're both here.
Thanks for having us.
Sean Trembath is a copy editor here at CBC, but by night, obviously, you can hear he's an avid movie fan. Craig Silliphant is an author, columnist, and film critic and movie geek. You can read more from him at craigsiliphant.com.